So here we are in Mangere Town Centre, and what are you two gentlemen doing here tonight?
Oh, we're going to stay here the night, and we're doing so as a part of the Park Up for Homes Mangere, and that's a protest, a peaceful protest to raise people's awareness and build solidarity for people living in cars tonight.
So obviously to be here, you obviously know a lot of what's happening in the community at the moment. What more could the government, or in your view, what should the government be doing to address the issues of homelessness and even the housing crisis that we have in Auckland at the moment?
They need to start building state houses. There is ample land that's owned by Housing New Zealand where they could be building state houses. At the moment, the government's busy selling that land off or redeveloping it and allowing it to be developed by the private sector. Feasibly, we could be building far more state houses than we're building, and that should be the first thing we do.
I attended the housing meeting on Monday where Nick Smith and Paula Bennett had the public meeting, and Nick Smith basically said that in Auckland they won't build low-cost housing because the developers won't do it. And what's your message back to the government on that? Because we own the land, don't we?
Well, we own the land, and none of those houses that we see today were ever built by the market and rented out at a profit. The reality is they've always involved subsidies, and we've just got to get real that if we want people to have decent affordable housing, then someone has to subsidise it, and it should be the taxpayer.
The problem is they keep talking about healthy Auckland, and they keep talking about what's needed for the future of Auckland. If we don't actually house people properly, if people have got to live in cars, and that's why we're here tonight, because they are living in cars and because they are in pretty desperate circumstances. And if something doesn't happen about that, then Auckland actually is going to be under serious problem in terms of its economy and its social structure. And so it's very short-sighted for people like Nick Smith to say that actually we can't afford to build low-cost housing. We can't afford not to build low-cost housing.
With your role in the Salvation Army, I mean, to me, as Joe Public, this has happened quite quickly. In your role as Salvation Army, what are you actually seeing just in the last 4 or 5 years as far as the needs of people?
Yeah, the tragedy is it hasn't happened quickly. It's happened over the last 10 years, and we've clearly said to the government some action needs to be taken, otherwise you're going to be in a crisis. And now we are in a crisis, and the reality is for us on a daily basis that we've got people lining up who are looking for homes, looking for somewhere to live. Now, a few years ago, we had somewhere to send them to. We could send them to an emergency house, we could send them perhaps to a hostel, or we could make some provision. Now we've got nothing that we can actually send people to. And we see people on a daily basis in appalling circumstances, doubled up in houses, living in garages, living in cars, and that's a crisis that we haven't seen. And so I don't think it's actually come on us quickly. It's just that it's come into the public attention now in a way, and hopefully it's going to bring action.
And what are some of the services that you offer to families that, some of these families, I've understood that some of them actually work, they've got employment, but they can't afford a house or they can't get a hold of a house. Is that what you've been finding as well?
We've got people who visit people in cars and provide them with some sustenance, some support. And many of those, or a number of those people are working people on low incomes and yet not able to sustain housing in the Auckland market.
From tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. is basically when everyone leaves from here. What would you like to see happen from Paula Bennett and Nick Smith?
It'd be ideal if they agreed that they needed to radically change their stance towards housing policy and actually started to be real about the investment that's required. That's unlikely to happen. I think what will happen is that protests like this will continue. I think the housing issue will probably not be as prominent in the media within a few months, but it will simmer away until the next election because the problem's not going to get better, and we're going to find crises and we're going to find human tragedies emerging on a regular basis, and I think the public will gradually become more concerned about that and possibly change the way they see politics.
Anyone at home watching, what resources do the Salvation Army need apart from donations?
Well, I think it isn't a matter of we can only do certain amount, and we can't be big housing providers. The government's got to actually do that. They've got to put that money in. We can support people in crisis. The difficulty at the moment is that now money is starting to have to go into emergency type and Government's talking about supporting people into motels, supporting people into new sorts of emergency housing. None of that is actually a satisfactory solution. It needs to happen because of crisis, but it's a tragedy that actually that is, because none of those, you can put somebody in a motel for a week, but then what happens to them? And there just needs to be capital money put in. And we said, I think 7 or 8 years ago, that the government need to put in $1 billion. That $1 billion is urgently needed to come in now.
And that's housing or all services?
No, $1 billion in housing, because there needs to be an urgent building program that actually puts housing in place.
I'm here because I've come to tautoko the kaupapa of Pāka Mangere, which actually is about highlighting the issue of homelessness in our community and the broader South Auckland community. So tonight we're in Mangere. I know in a couple of weeks we're going to be in Otara, and actually in Manurewa we have problems with homelessness. So I'm here in solidarity with my community, love my community, and I think what we've seen tonight actually is a coming together through a common link, and that link is actually about our relationships to one another and our willingness, as you can see, to feed, to make sure people have what we consider real basic things: a roof over their head, kai and the puku, and that's supposed to be the basis for all of us to start to have good lives.
What have you noticed living here? The key issues, be it wages or whether it's employment, housing, all of them?
Oh gosh, it's all of them actually. It's the fact that I think a lot of our families haven't got a secure base. Without a secure base, it's very hard to go to school. And actually we know through research that Child Poverty Action Group have undertaken that discontinued education actually regresses children. And so the importance of a house and a home can't be underestimated, because it impacts, and the consequences of those impacts are just felt.
Schooling,
but even an ability for an adult to go to work. And that coupled with, I think, a government that hasn't taken any responsibility for keeping up with need. I mean, we have a Housing New Zealand government agency which is supposed to meet the needs of those who are most in need. In my electorate alone, I have 158 people on the waiting list. They've been through a process, they've been assessed, but there aren't any homes for them to go into. Families moving in together, 21 people living in a 3-bedroom house, families parking up in the driveways, using the bathroom and other utilities, children, if they're lucky, being able to sleep inside. I mean, we have families come through our office, they want us to support their applications to Housing New Zealand. We have families where their houses aren't insulated, children are sick, adults are sick, and they come to us and say, hey, we need a heater, we need to move in some instances, and the medical professionals are trying to influence our government departments. But at the end of the day, if we don't have enough homes for people to move into, then I think what you see, people living in cars and out on the streets, is a natural consequence to that.
It wasn't that long ago that WINZ was actually making people leave the rural areas to come to Auckland, and it's basically kind of set them up, and now it's done a U-turn where we'll give you $5,000 to go back. Okay, so this movement, which it's a peaceful protest, it's been labelled a peaceful protest tonight. 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, everyone goes home. What's your message tomorrow, or even your wish list from the government? If you had one that you said, right, we can have this, what would that be?
I actually think the government can do something. We've got 30,000 empty homes across Auckland, a lot of non-resident landlords. I think immediately they could call that housing stock into action. How they do that, I'm not sure.
Government subsidising rent, or?
Oh, well, actually, no. Enabling councils, I think, to utilise the homes of absentee landlords and to maybe empower them on behalf of the landlords to collect rent. But we need to free up stock. And if that stock is sitting there because the investors think that it's easier for them not to have a tenant and just wait for the capital gain, then we've got to be deterring them. So there should be some sort of tax, I'll call it a tax, for homes that are just sitting there idly unoccupied, that is automatically placed on every on the annual rates bill of every vacant property in the country. Now that's going to motivate some action, especially if it's 20 grand or something like that. In terms of other things, the government has got to start building more houses. They just have to do it. We have just over 3,000 in my electorate. There are a lot of properties that they should have been developing, and I think they need to actively transition people in Housing New Zealand into some of these social housing areas. They should be supporting Housing New Zealand tenants into those homes. So there's lots that the government can do, and for them to say that they don't really have the answer other than let the market dictate, change resource management legislation, and miraculously the market's going to fix this issue, they're deluded.
With National, there seems to be a lot of, I suppose it's the best way, it's elephants in the room where whether it's overseas investors, whether it's property speculators, and they seem very reluctant to addressing these issues.
Well, because they're philosophical issues. I mean, for them, they would rather have nothing to do with this issue. They would like to abstain themselves.
$5,000 go away?
Yeah, $5,000 go away, or Salvation Army, you take all the stock and you deal with it. So this government does not believe, I think, that they have a role in meeting the needs of those most vulnerable in our community. So it's a fundamental issue that our country has to grapple with. This government will not address the issue. And so if they won't address the issue, we've seen today in Parliament they kicked to touch paid parental leave.
Yes,
they did. They vetoed the 6-month paid parental leave bill. It's the same issue again. And so
we have the other issue of members, staff, smear campaigns against people actually trying to help with this very situation.
Well, I think what they try and do is distract us from the real issues. And so rather than
flag changes.
Yeah, well, rather than focus on the fact we've got homelessness and you have marae and some of our Māori community opening their arms as wide as they can to say, we'll offer you, we'll manaaki, we'll support you, we care for you, to undermine the issue that we're having, they'll attack an individual. And so that discredits the whole issue about homelessness.
Yes.
Well, it's not going to work. I think that's been their tactic for the duration of their term as government, and those tactics are not working anymore. People are seeing through them. I think people do care. Actually, New Zealanders have got big hearts, and we care about one another. And the reality is you can't ignore it anymore. Or if you haven't seen it before, you do now. Because the media, I believe, have stepped up and they are providing opportunities for New Zealanders to understand what's happening around the country. And as I said, I believe fundamentally that New Zealanders are proud of our country, proud of who we are, and we help people. We will not turn our back and pretend that issues don't exist, and we fundamentally want to fix them. So I think that's the biggest challenge for the government. They can't pull the wool over our eyes
anymore.
Yes. Yeah,
hey.
we are awake.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, thank you very much for your time. And
no worries.
Stay warm.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.